Hey guys, so I'm on the Wikipedia page called List of Fallacies, and I wanted to check some of them out and see some stuff. And the reason that I wanted to make this video is that there's something that's been kind of bothering me about logical fallacies lately, which is that people seem to think everything is a logical fallacy, kind of. I've just seen that in YouTube. In YouTube, there's a lot of, arguing back and forth in videos. One person makes a video sharing their opinions, another person makes a reply video where they kind of might dispute the person's beliefs and back and forth, whatever. So, and I want to check some of these out and see what's up with them. So, I don't know, I haven't looked at this yet, so I'm just gonna see. First thing I see is anecdotal fallacy, using a personal experience or an isolated example instead of sound reasoning or compelling evidence. Okay, so, this, I think, can be a fallacy. I wouldn't call anecdotal... Can you stop playing music? Anyway, I wouldn't call anecdotal evidence a fallacy so much as it's just much less, it's much weaker evidence than actual statistical data, but anecdotal evidence can be important in different scenarios. For example, there are certain things that there aren't really studies on. Like, for example, like, say, hair care, that's something that when you're talking about what is good for hair, what isn't, a lot of times what people use is anecdotal evidence because no one really, bothers to research that. And I mean, kind of rightly so. They're researching, cancer and stuff, but, sometimes anecdotal evidence can be useful in that situation. Sometimes anecdotal evidence is just useful because it is evidence, however much weaker it might be than statistical data. And also, I think that sometimes personal examples can help people to understand something in a way that statistics can't, especially if it's an emotional issue. A lot of people will also talk about appeal to emotion fallacy, I guess. But I think using emotions as reasoning or using emotional arguments can be important. If you take something like poverty, it's something that you can't really fully understand through statistics. Well, really, truly, you can't understand it unless you experience it firsthand, right? But the next best thing is you can watch documentaries on it, and you can see different individuals' specific stories of how they deal with poverty and go through their everyday life in a state of poverty, which is something that you can't understand through statistics on GDP per capita and what percent of the world has electricity and whatever, what have you. And I think that empathizing with another person can be a form of understanding, and therefore a form of knowledge. And, okay, so that's good enough. Appeal to probability is the statement that takes something for granted because it would probably be the case, or might be the case. So again, these aren't really fallacies so much as, okay, just because something is probably true doesn't mean it's true, but if it's probably true, then it's probably true. So appeal to probability is still some evidence for something. However strong the probability is the strength of the evidence, right? So I think sometimes just different things can be fallacies in certain situations, but people will kind of define them very broadly so that anything like it is a fallacy. I remember watching a YouTube video where you know what an ad hominem attack is. It's usually considered a fallacy where you criticize the person who's making the argument instead of their argument. And you say, because this person is stupid or whatever, or because this person has whatever bad quality, therefore their argument is wrong. I remember it was a YouTuber by the name of Mr. Repzion, and he was criticizing a YouTuber named Vegan Gains, and he was also insulting him at the same time, but he wasn't insulting him and saying, you know, you're stupid, you're ugly, haha, therefore you're wrong. He was just insulting him to insult him because he doesn't like the guy, or because insulting people is entertaining. And so Vegan Gains watches a video and he says, this is an ad hominem attack, and it really wasn't an ad hominem attack. He was just insulting Vegan Gains. It was just an insult. It wasn't an insult that was meant to imply that his arguments were false. It was just general insulting. So let's see. Again, okay, there's a ton on here, but every single one is only sometimes fallacious. This is the third one. Argument from fallacy assumes that if an argument for some conclusion is fallacious, then the conclusion is false. Okay, so this could definitely be a fallacy. If someone's argument has a logical fallacy, and you say, therefore, their argument is wrong, or the belief that they're saying is wrong, they could still be right, even though they used a logical fallacy, right? Obviously, yeah, they could still be right, even though they used a logical fallacy. But the fact that they used a logical fallacy makes them less likely to be right, and therefore pointing out that someone used a logical fallacy, it is not necessarily committing argument from fallacy. So a lot of these fallacies are, they give logical evidence for something, although they can't. They're sometimes fallacies, but they're sometimes not fallacies, depending on how you use them. And I think people tend to accuse people of committing logical fallacies very quickly. Let's see. Let's look at some informal fallacies. Okay, appeal to the stone. Dismissing a claim as absurd without demonstrating proof for its absurdity. Let's check that out. What's it called appeal to the stone? Maybe just because that's an absurd title? Let's see. Speaker A. Infectious diseases are caused by microbes. Speaker B. What a ridiculous idea. Speaker A. How so? Speaker B. It's obviously ridiculous. Speaker B gives no evidence or reasoning, and when pressed, claims that Speaker A's statement is inherently absurd, thus applying the fallacy. It suddenly got really dark in here. So anyway, so the fallacy appeal to the stone is saying something is inherently absurd or self-evidently absurd. Which, again, is not necessarily a fallacy. I would disagree that Speaker B is necessarily committing a fallacy, although infectious diseases are caused by microbes. What a ridiculous idea! Well, that's not really a ridiculous idea, is it? It would only be a ridiculous idea to someone who lives long ago and has not heard of things like bacteria, but I don't know why anyone would think that infectious diseases are caused by microbes is a ridiculous idea. But anyway, I think the fact that something is or sounds ridiculous could be some evidence against it. And also, I think something being ridiculous or absurd, you can't really prove that. Well, you might be able to prove it if you did a survey asking like a bunch of people, do you think this is absurd? Check yes or no. But otherwise, it's a lot of things you can only say that they're absurd because it's obviously absurd or it's self-evidently absurd. It just seems like an absurd idea. And although an absurd idea could be true, the fact that something seems very absurd to you could be evidence that it is not true. Furthermore, I can easily see a lot of people claiming that other people are using the appeal to the stone fallacy when they're just saying that something is absurd. Again, like the ad hominem attacks, they might not be saying, they might just be saying that something is absurd, that it sounds crazy, and someone else will say, oh, you're doing the appeal to the stone fallacy. You're saying that just because this is absurd, it means it's not true, when really they might just be saying that it's absurd because it's absurd, man. They might just be pointing that out. That's kind of just what I wanted to say here. There's a ton of different fallacies, that you can use, but really, most of these, I don't really see them as fallacies so much as weaknesses in a person's argument. They're somewhat weak. They're not proofs, they're evidences. And apparently because they're not proof, they're a fallacy. There are some really true fallacies here, like, A or B, A, therefore not B, affirming a disjunct. Like, there's some actual logical things, like, you know, if A, then B, B, therefore A, affirming the consequent. So there's some very obvious logical fallacies that actually are logically fallacious. Fallacious, is that a word? But a lot of these are just kind of not really fallacies. They're just kind of imperfect arguments. But when do you have a perfect argument? If someone commits a logical fallacy, most often what they're doing is they're not proving anything, but they still might be giving a good case for something. It's just not proof. And a lot of times you can't prove something. All you can do is give evidence, and that doesn't mean that your argument is fallacious. It just means that it's somewhat incomplete. If by whiskey? This is another one that's actually true. Gambler's fallacy. The incorrect belief that separate independent events can affect the likelihood of another random event. If a fair coin lands on heads 10 times in a row, the belief that it is due to the number of times it had previously landed on tails is incorrect. Yeah, I've seen people commit this before, actually. It'll be similar, like, something like that. What'll happen is you'll be flipping a coin, and it will get, like, heads, and then someone will be like, the next one has to be tails, it has to be tails, it's had so many heads, it has to be tails. When in reality, the fact that it has been heads so many times doesn't affect the next flip. You could get heads 100 times, and it would still be the 101st flip of the coin would still have a 50% chance of being heads and a 50% chance of being tails. Although it'd be extremely unlikely to get 100 heads in a row. So, yeah. So that's an actual fallacy. So see, there's some actual fallacies, but I think the word fallacy is just being abused with all these claims of fallacies that aren't really truly fallacies. Another fallacy that really is a fallacy is circular logic, saying something like, the Bible is true. How do you know the Bible is true? Because the Bible says that the Bible is true. That would be a circular argument, and an actual fallacy. Alright, I think you guys get the point here. So that's all I'm going to say.